Greetings! Hello, friends, enemies, 5 listeners. We are here today to present a episode to you from our vault, the Patreon vault. We do this periodically where we release an episode that was recorded exclusively for our lovely patrons, and we release it to the general public to give you just a little taste of the special episodes we record. We do an exclusive Patreon episode every month, and that goes out to all of our patron levels. So even if you contribute $1, or I think it's $1.09 or something with the tax. If you go and you find $1, you scrounge up some coins from a mall fountain and you send that into Patreon, then you get to hear exclusive content from us every single month. And we wanted to release this episode right now in particular because the Unsolved Mysteries Reboot is about to start season 3. That is coming out, let me see here. That is coming out at the end of October. So it looks like we get an episode October 18th, 25th, and November 1st. I don't know if we only get 3 episodes. That'll be weird. But since the Unsolved Mysteries Reboot is coming back once again, it's been 2 years since we had some new content. We are releasing from the vault the first Patreon episode where we talked about the Unsolved Mysteries Reboot. So in this episode, you can hear us talk about episode 1 and 2 from season 1 of the Unsolved Mysteries Reboot. I feel like that's really confusing because it's not the first season of Unsolved Mysteries, but you understand what I mean. The new episodes that are being released on Netflix. This is us celebrating that we're getting even more episodes. You can hear us discuss episodes 1 and 2 in this episode that was previously only for patrons. And we will be doing new Patreon episodes for the reboot. Since we're only getting 1 episode a week, we won't be talking about that until our November Patreon episode. So if that is something that you are interested in, be sure to sign up at any level. Patreon.com/perhaps-it's-you. And it's actually spelled right now. So be sure to sign up for that if that is something that you are interested in. As always, the show wouldn't exist without our lovely patrons. So thank you so much for their support and for keeping the show going through the years. I'm excited to see what new Unsolved Mysteries are coming. Who knows? That is a mystery as well. So I hope you enjoy this episode and let us know if you have any theories about the cases presented. The first one in particular is very wild. And that is all for now. We will be back soon with a brand new episode about the original Robert Stack episodes. We are currently sort of towards the end of season 7. I know that's been going on for a while now, but we're sort of coming to the close of that. So thank you so much, everyone. Solve some mysteries or don't, but be sure to keep on barking. Bye. Hello. Hello, everyone. Hello, mystery solvers with money to burn. Today's the day. We're talking about Reboot episodes 1 and 2.
The new Unsolved Mysteries, the moment we've all been waiting for.
I guess so. Yeah, here it is. It's happened. I was just telling Samantha that I stayed up too late last night because I got sucked in looking at the extra evidence and people's theories on Reddit, and then was like, Liz, it's 2 a.m. You gotta go to bed. Quit trying to solve mysteries. It's just what they want. It's just what they wanted from me. So we're here today. Clearly, we're going to solve these mysteries. That's what's going to happen.
This might be a long episode. I think folks should probably settle in. I was really torn on how much notes I should take. Because I feel like unlike our usual episodes, where some people watch, some people don't. I feel like probably a greater percentage of people don't most of the time. Our recaps of the episode make sense because a lot of our audience hasn't watched what we've watched. But this time, I feel like most people who are listening have probably watched these episodes. So I was like, how detailed should I be in my notes? But I want to have enough to talk about. Long story short, I took 6 pages of notes. So settle in. We'll see how this goes. But I was even rewatching these episodes for the second time, captivated by the mysteries. And I don't know if it's the way they're presented or if it's the stories themselves or that we're just getting more details or what, but there's something about these mysteries that are like so much more gripping, and I want them to be solved so bad. Is I want, it makes me wonder if this is how people felt watching the original, when they were aired live.
Sure.
But the internet didn't exist back then either, so you couldn't go down Reddit rabbit holes at 2 a.m.
You had to just assume that like that person was gonna walk through your yard, and you would be like, "It's him! I saw him on Unsolved Mysteries," right? Like you just felt like maybe if you were attentive, you would like see him at Kmart, and then you would call the tip line.
Right.
But now
Right.
it's like, oh, I'll probably just solve this on my computer right now. I'll probably do what no one else has been able to do. Yeah, originally I was like, oh, we'll do 2 episodes. Like we'll each cover 1 episode, for these Patreons. And then last night I was like, is there going to be so much that this is going to be like 3 hours? Like, should we have only done
we will
1?
Find out.
Should we have only done 1 per Patreon episode? I was like, but I already told people we were doing both, so I think we're kind of stuck with it.
This will just have to be an experiment. I do think there's some of these mysteries are going to have more additional information than others.
Right,
like,
that's true.
The episode I covered, I feel like you can go down some deep internet rabbit holes. I don't know how many rabbit holes you went down with yours. I'm not sure there's like as much there as far as like extra stuff to talk about, but you can let me know when we get to yours. So we'll see. If this episode ends up being 4 hours long, I guess people really got their money's worth.
Yeah. It's an experiment, and it'll decide what we do for the remaining ones, I guess.
Exactly.
All right, we should just get started with yours then. So Samantha's going to do the first one, the mystery on the rooftop.
Yeah,
which I think everybody on the internet has kind of been theorizing about this mystery, because it goes in some very unexpected directions, and there's different possibilities. I'm kind of at this moment of 2 minds about it. I can't quite decide which one I think is true.
Okay. This is interesting. We're gonna have fun talking about this one. Yeah, I
thought I fucking knew last night before I rewatched it. And then I rewatched it, and there was stuff I had forgotten about. Yeah. And then when I went to go like look at the note and stuff, and then I got sucked in more, I was like, oh, I don't know now.
Yeah. So I had a similar journey, I will say.
Okay.
And the showrunners, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, people that made the reboot, really knew like they really nailed the lineup, because this episode being first
sucks you in.
I think I talked about this on our regular episode, where we talked about our experiences watching the reboot, and I had very low expectations for the reboot, to be honest. And I just put it on because we were making dinner. There was nothing else to watch. And I was like, oh, I should probably watch this reboot. And both me and my husband were like captivated to the point where we like couldn't tear our eyes off the TV. And that was the moment where I was like, wow, there's really something here. So anyway, I'm going to get right into it because, like I said, I have a lot of notes. This is the unexplained death of Ray Rivera. So the episode opens with Allison Rivera, who is Ray's late wife. She speaks throughout the episode, and she starts by describing their magical wedding in a town on the beaches of Puerto Rico called Isabela.
It looks so lovely.
Oh, it looked so happy. We see home video footage of the day, and it looks so special. Ray is smiling and saying he can't wait to see Allison come down the aisle. We see Allison in her wedding dress with her father. Everyone looks, I just wrote happy multiple times in my notes. Ray's brother Angel appears in the show and describes his brother's deep love for Puerto Rico and his family. And then right away after we see the footage of the wedding, Allison cuts to the chase and says, I don't know why Ray disappeared. When they called it a suicide, I didn't believe it. He ran out of the house as if he was late for something. Who looks at their watch and says, oh, it's 6:30, time to jump off a big roof? So right away, you're like, okay, this is intense.
Well, she also sounds very like put together, very rational, very logical, right? Like she doesn't seem like she's obviously emotional about Ray's death, but she doesn't seem like, I don't know,
irrational in any way at all. Like she has a very cool head throughout this whole thing, and is like, exactly, look, this doesn't add up. Something is weird. So she's, I feel like, a really reliable narrator in this whole thing. She goes on to say that she is convinced there's something bigger going on. She thinks that Ray, quote, turned over some rock and discovered something. She isn't sure what, but she's sure of one thing. He did not kill himself. And then we roll the intro. What do you think about the intro? Like the new intro?
You know, the theme song just doesn't slap like the old one does. I
have to agree.
It's, I guess, similar. I don't know enough about music to tell you. I guess it's the melody is the same. It has a similar whatever vibe, but it just doesn't slap. I think we all know that old theme song really got your pussy popping, and this is just like
this one doesn't quite have the same thing.
It's more subtle. It's more subtle. It does kind of have an ode to the old song, but it's not as good. And I think music actually plays like a much less of a component in the new series. Like there's scoring, but it's much more subtle. And like personally, that's a little bit of a loss because some of the music from the old show is so good. But also, that would probably be like weird and distracting at this point.
A little
bit. Like,
man,
this synth is like really rocking out. Like that has nothing to do with anything. Yeah. So yeah, you got the little ode to Robert Stack as well, like over the title.
The final title. Yeah, that is nice. Okay, so we are introduced to Ray as soon as the credits are done rolling. He was a big fit guy. He played water polo and he had a smile that lit up the room.
He was super handsome. Yeah, super handsome.
Very much so. And I wrote in my notes that really comes through. This like smile, this happiness that he had, this like zest for life really comes through in all of the photos of him. There's not a photo they show of Ray in this whole thing that doesn't have this gigantic smile that you can tell was just infectious when you saw him.
He was clearly photogenic, and it does make him seem like he was super likable, that he would be charming, that people would want to get to know him. Like he just has that sort of look.
Right. So his father was in the military, so their family moved around a lot. His brother says that family was everything to Ray, and he explains that because they moved around so much, they became close with each other because any friends they made would have inevitably be temporary.
Yeah.
Ray's mother, Maria Rivera, says that Ray was happy, and it was rare to see him without a smile on his face. He was always laughing and making jokes. He wanted to make people laugh. Ray's dream was to be a writer and a director. Allison says that film was everything to him, and this led them to move to Southern California shortly after their wedding. But not surprisingly, he struggled to bring in enough money. The whole screenplay writing thing just wasn't working out, which I think it doesn't for most people.
I don't even think they were there for that long.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's just sort of like most creative things, something where you're not going to make money at first. There's a lot of networking and shit like that. So I think they didn't really have the like capital to stay and, keep trying that route.
So according to Allison, Ray turned to a friend in Baltimore named Porter Stansberry.
Just think about this rich fucking name.
Porter Stansberry.
Like
the name you would give a cartoon villain.
I hate it. It's a name where, like, on the birth certificate, they were like, wow, is this person going to have a sweater wrapped around his shoulders at all times? You're sure? Porter Stansberry?
He may have come out of the womb with a sweater around his shoulders.
I think he did. As a little newborn baby. Porter Stansberry. And it's like, oh, they met playing water polo. And I was like, no fucking kidding.
So Porter was a high school buddy of Ray. They knew each other when they were 15. They both, like Liz said, they both played water polo, and they stayed close even after they graduated high school. So Allison describes Porter as a, quote, finance guy, because of course he is. And
because when he's not playing water polo or like buying expensive horses and naming them 1, 2, 3, he's just counting money like with a cigar somehow, or juggling gold bullion.
So, unsurprisingly, he owned a company called Stansberry Associates. And this company wrote financial newsletters, which seems like, I don't know.
It seems kind of shady.
It does. From the beginning, I got a weird feeling about this financial newsletter company.
It's like supposed to be telling you like what stocks are going to be, gaining what worth. some people on Reddit were saying that, like, it's basically proven that this company was, like, inflating stocks illegally. I don't know if that's, like, actually true or not, but it doesn't seem like it's really totally on the up and up.
No. Well, and we find out later, which we'll talk about, that this company was implicated in some illegal activity and fined a substantial amount of money. So it wasn't on the up and up. And in how, like, deep that went, we're not entirely sure, but it's suspicious, to say the least. As Allison tells it, Porter had wanted Ray to come right for him for a long time, but Ray had no knowledge of finance or stocks.
She says it this way, though. She was like, Porter had wanted Ray for a long time to come right for him. And I went, oh, that's not how I thought that sentence was going to end. Because there's this weird, Porter had wanted Ray for a long time to come right for him.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. That's an interesting line of thinking there. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
I was like, oh, Ray seems very handsome. I bet a lot of people wanted him to come right for them.
Yeah. Ray didn't want to write for a financial newsletter. He didn't know anything about finances or stocks. He wanted to be a screenwriter. But when it wasn't working out in California and they needed a steady income, he gave in and took a job at Porter's company.
See, I thought this was weird. I was like, why would you want to hire someone that doesn't have any knowledge of finance? And Mac was like, no, rich guys like love nepotism. They like love being able to get their friends jobs and like show off.
Oh yeah, that didn't seem surprising to me at all.
And I was like, oh, that's a really good point. I thought it was weird, but once he said it that way, I was like, no, actually that makes sense.
Yeah, the rich guys like this are just chummy. You know what I mean? Like, they want to be surrounded by all of their friends. They want to be surrounded by yes men. So, of course, they're going to hire their friends.
Yeah.
So, in December 2004, the couple moved to Baltimore. They didn't know anyone in Baltimore except Porter. So, they made a pact that they would stay there and try it out for 24 months. But it seems like they were able to develop this community in Baltimore pretty quickly. They found a home that they loved. They found a church, a community. Allison says that they were very happy in Baltimore. Then on May 16th, 2006, Allison left for a business trip. The morning she left, Ray got up with her and they ate breakfast together. Allison remembers telling him, "I love you so much," and he said, "Thank you for loving me so much." And I think this is just highlighting that it was like a normal day.
Yeah, that seems really cute.
It was really, it seems like
a cute little moment.
Highlights how he had this love for her and they were looking forward to the future. Later, Allison will tell us how he really wanted a family. So
they also haven't been married that long.
No, they're still in the honeymoon.
Yeah. For you to be like, "Thank you for loving me so much," right? Like,
right,
it's still like very special.
Yeah. And then 6 or 6:30 that evening, Allison calls Ray from her hotel room. She gets his voicemail, which she thought was strange, and then stranger, he didn't return her call. Allison then called Claudia, who was a woman who was staying with them as a house guest at the time. Claudia says that evening, around the same time, like around 6 or 6:30, she had heard a phone call come in. Ray answered it, and then he immediately ran out of the house in a hurry. Claudia walks around the house to see if Ray had come back. All the lights were on, but Ray was not there. And then the next morning, Claudia calls Allison like at 5 a.m. and says that Ray didn't come home at all that night. And at this point, Allison says that even though she's not typically one to panic, she immediately knew something was up, something was wrong. And she got into her car and went home and started going home immediately. As she was driving, she called everyone she could think of. At the time, Ray's parents were living in Puerto Rico. They hadn't heard from him. His brother, Angel, was living in Orlando, and he hadn't heard from him. And Angel knew right away that something was wrong and immediately got onto a flight from Orlando to Baltimore that afternoon. So this was clearly out of character for Ray. It alarmed everyone he knew.
People showed up fast. Like, he had a very loyal, committed family. His in-laws showed up. Their friends started flying in. Like, People immediately were like, we need to find Ray. And they didn't, wait 48 hours or whatever I mean.
Right, exactly. So at the house, Ray's car is missing, and the house looks like he had left in a hurry in the middle of something. There was an open bag of chips, a half-drank soda, his Invisalign braces were just sitting out, all of the lights were on in the bedroom, in the office. So something is not right here. And at this point, like Liz said, the house becomes a command center as his friends and family began organizing the search for Ray. Angel arrived that evening. All of their friends gathered at the house. Ray's parents flew in from Puerto Rico. Allison's parents arrived. They started coming up with flyers and search grids and phone trees. Allison describes it as work. They all banded together to try and figure out what had happened to Ray.
She's clearly super well organized. He has a really loyal support network. She's not just crying, wondering where he is. She's very practical about this. And she seems like a very practical person.
Porter, Ray's friend, whom he worked for, put up $1,000 reward. And then
I want everybody to think about the name Porter Sansbury, or whatever the hell it is. And then he only coughed up $1,000 for that reward. The smallest fucking reward. Samantha and I could probably scramble together $1,000 reward if we really needed to. Yes. And we're not named Porter Sansbury, and we didn't meet on a water polo team. And my family doesn't go to a country club or whatever. This man has his own company that's literally in finance, and he's like, "Oh, here's a spare $1,000." He probably spends that on lunch.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing.
This occurred to me as well.
Nothing to him. That's probably changing his couch.
Yeah, and we're not specifically told this, but this appears to be the only contribution that Porter Stansberry makes to the search for Ray.
Oh, what? He's missing? Here. He just probably reaches into his wallet. Here's $1,000. This is a reward.
It seems like it. But this reward they were able to use to attract some media attention. Allison gets the media to cover his disappearance. Unfortunately, this came up with nothing. Ray didn't use his credit cards. His cell phone was dead. He never pulled out any cash from their bank accounts. He had just vanished, and there was really no clues. At this point, we meet reporter Jane Miller. Jane seems like a no-nonsense lady, and I like her a lot. She said that she became interested in the story because it was so unusual. Here was a man in his mid-30s who was popular and happy. There was no evidence that he was in trouble or was running for something. He just disappeared without a trace. So Ray disappears on May 16th. By May 22nd, his friends and family are still searching. This is 6 days. Allison's parents, it really seems like at this point, they're at a loss for what to do. And so her parents say, we're just going to drive around and we're going to look in all the parking lots and see if we can find his vehicle. Mm-hmm. So they set out, just the two of them. And as they are driving around, Allison's mother suddenly spots the car. When they found the car, there was a parking ticket on it, and the parking lot attendant said that the car must have been parked there the evening that Ray disappeared, because the parking attendant knew the day they put the ticket on it. Reporter Jane Miller tells us that finding the car really accelerated the case because now there was a clue. She says that the area where the car was found was a parking lot near the Belvedere Hotel. The Belvedere Hotel is a massive historic landmark in Baltimore. It's a bit confusing because it's still called the Belvedere Hotel, but it is, and that's how they refer to it in the show, but it has since been converted to private condominiums. That happened in 1991. Although, according to Wikipedia, there are some areas that are still open to the public. It's primarily a private building. Jane Miller tells us that the company Ray worked for, which people refer to in the show as simply Stansberry, she says Stansberry is located in that part of town. So it wasn't totally unusual that he would know the area or maybe even be there. But I
do find it a little weird that no one that works there saw his car.
Yeah, well, I don't know that this is down the
that
street.
Close.
This isn't the parking lot of Stansberry. This is just a random parking. It's not even the parking lot for the Belvedere. It's just a small public parking lot.
Yeah.
So this is the part of town where Stansberry is located, but it's not, his company isn't in the Belvedere. It's just it's not an area of town that would be totally weird for him to be in.
Sure.
And also, from what we'll learn a little bit later, it's a little bit suspicious that this is as far as we could tell, the only reason he knows this area of town is because that's where he works. So keep that in mind. At this point, we finally hear from a cop who shows up in a news archive clip. This is Frederick Bellafield III of the Baltimore PD.
It's not a name you expect from a cop.
He says that Ray's cell phone was not recovered with the car. In fact, there was virtually nothing in the vehicle that would indicate what happened to Ray, which is unfortunate, not helpful at all. Jane Miller goes on to tell us that once the car was found, friends and family started organizing searches in that area. The next thing that happened, according to Miller, is that someone found the hole in the roof of the Belvedere. And this is where, like, the whole tone of the episode shifts.
Yeah, things suddenly got weirder and weirder.
Yes. Allison says that 3 of Ray's coworkers decided to go onto the roof of the parking lot across from the Belvedere. They looked over the edge and they spotted flip-flops on the lower roof area near the hole. I think if you are watching, if for some reason you are listening to this episode and you have not watched this first episode of the reboot, you really need the visual of the Belvedere. It's the super tall building, and then much closer to the ground. I mean, I think it's like, I don't know, 20 stories tall or something. It's huge. But then much closer to the ground is just a few stories tall. It's still part of the Belvedere, but it's like, I don't know, maybe an addition.
Yeah, it's a much smaller room. They called it the church space. I think it was added on later, it looks like to me.
It was a recreational area that's not really used anymore by the people that live and work in,
right,
reside in the Belvedere, but it's still part of the Belvedere and lower, sort of at the base of the tall part of the building. And then his coworkers were across from that in a parking, like, garage structure on top of the parking lot, parking structure looking over.
Honestly, when they showed the view from the top of the parking garage onto the top of the smaller part of the Belvedere, I don't even know that I would have seen that hole. Like, and also, I don't know what it is, but sometimes there's just like random shoes around. You know what I mean?
It's true. I don't know.
Sometimes there's just like a shoe by the side of the road and you go, I wonder who lost that shoe.
Like someone's running around without their shoes on.
I mean, I get that they're looking for Ray, but to spot these like flip-flops in this pretty small hole in this roof, I was impressed. I wasn't sure I would have seen it.
Right. So the only way to see this hole was either to be on top of the Belvedere or to be on top of that parking structure. So it was lucky that they went up there. Jane Miller describes it as not a big hole. It looks like as if, she describes it kind of the same way you do, that if you had seen that hole, you might have thought, oh, there was some water damage, like a little bit of the roof caved in. It's not like a massive gaping hole.
It's like, a little bit more than your hip circumference. Like, a person can get through it, but not like the roof caved in. Like, it's pretty small.
Right. So the people that found the hole called the police, who met up with Gary Shivers, who was the Belvedere's concierge at the time.
I feel so bad for this guy.
Oh, this poor guy. Gary is on the show, and he says that the space where the hole was the old racquetball club. It's not a frequently used space. I believe there was like a conference room in there or something, but people didn't go in there very often. It was clearly part of the building that was not usually occupied.
Well, once it wasn't a hotel anymore and it was condos, they probably just didn't really need it.
I'm sure they just store random stuff in there. Gary says that when he opened the door, he immediately smelled the stench of a decomposing body. And it was the body of Ray Rivera.
This is really bad for this
horrifying.
guy.
Yeah, he describes how he spent like 30 years of his life or something at the Belvedere. He worked his way up to being like a facility manager, and he has so many good memories, but then he says that like this was the lowest, most worst part of ever, like this whole period of his life.
Well, it's clearly traumatized him because he says that a lot of times now when he opens the door for a second, he like sees that body still.
Yeah.
It's like awful. Made such an impression on him. Like, what a horrible surprise.
So bad. Okay. So we next meet Michael Byer, who is a detective for the Baltimore police. He was the lead investigator. He was a homicide detective at the time. He says that unfortunately the body was so badly decomposed that there was very little evidence that they could find. Detective Byer describes Ray's autopsy as, quote, brutal reading. He had multiple rib fractures. Both of his lungs were punctured. He had long lacerations, damage to the skull. His right leg had 2 different fractures, and the extent of the injuries seemed to suggest to the detectives that Ray fell from a great height, which you might expect at first, being that this part, the part of the building he fell through was at the base of a very tall building. However, it's not that simple. Jane Miller tells us about the first theory, because what they're trying to figure out is how did Ray come through this roof? And the first theory is that he came off the very top part of the Belvedere, falling 11 stories through the lower roof. This is probably what you would jump to, at first. He jumped off of the top of the Belvedere. But the problem with this theory is that the hole in relation to the edge of the upper roof is very far away. It's 45 feet. And we see a drone shot directly above, and Unsolved Mysteries puts some arrows on the screen, and it's impossible. There is no way he came off the top of the Belvedere, because the other thing about the Belvedere is that it has this protruding structure lower down. I have a hard time describing architecture, but it has this he would have had to go over that and then 45 feet straight down to where he landed, and it seems inconceivable. And in fact, Detective Byer says that he did not believe Ray went off the very top part of the Belvedere. So then we come to the next possibility, which is that he fell from the top of the parking garage adjacent to the Belvedere, which is where his coworkers had spotted the hole from. This also seems unlikely, because here the hole is still quite a ways away. It's 20 feet from the edge here. And then additionally, this parking structure is much lower. It would be a 20-foot fall. And a 4 to 6 foot tall fall can kill you. However, the extent of Ray's injuries were so severe, and the hole in the roof was so small that you would think if someone had fallen from just 20 feet, there would be a larger hole. Maybe
I'm not even sure you would
severe of injuries. Maybe you wouldn't have even gone through the roof at 20 feet.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't even know that you would have the momentum to go through the roof. I think you would just kind of splatter on top.
Right, exactly. The third theory is that he came off of the 11th floor ledge of the main part of the Belvedere, which is a narrow ledge that wraps around the building, a bit lower than the top part of the roof. So this ledge is also a bit closer to the hole, but still quite high up in the air, so it seems like a possibility. However, there's problems with this theory as well, because to get to those ledges, you would have to go through someone's condo, or an office, or a room. There is no way at all to get on that ledge without going through someone's personal property, and also, that ledge is not an accessible part of the building. It's not a catwalk. It's just a decorative part of the structure. So all of the windows that look out onto that ledge are half windows. Most of them don't even open. It would not be an easy place to get to this ledge. So the hole is still a mystery. And then there's other weird things. On the roof where the hole is located, investigators find Ray's cell phone, and it's just sitting there undamaged in complete working order. The Detective Byer says it looks as if someone had placed it.
Right.
Which is very strange. And also Ray's eyeglasses are found, and they don't have a scratch on them. Jane Miller says that the damage to his body was severe and fatal, and that the force it took for him to go through that roof, it's odd that his phone and eyeglasses were completely undamaged. Allison points out that his flip-flops appear to have damage to the front of them that resemble drag marks.
I don't know. Really I feel like my flip-flops end up looking like that just from me walking around.
I mean, especially if the front part of your foot drags a little bit when you walk, I feel like mine do. That's not entirely unlikely. And the flip-flops are also broken, which she found suspicious, but his body was broken.
Who hasn't broken a pair of flip-flops?
Yeah, they're flimsy flip-flops. They're very cheap, shower flip-flops. So I
didn't find that suspicious at all, actually.
But Detective Byer says that it was odd, and to him, it did look staged. Jane Miller says that the question is, did these items fall with him, or did someone put them there after the fact? Also strange is what was not found with Ray. The money clip that Allison bought him for their wedding gift was extremely special to Ray. He had it with him at all times, and it also contained his money, his ID, his credit cards. This was never found, and they still haven't found it. So this is weird. If no one else was involved, you would expect this item to be on Ray's person.
Or it has to be somewhere.
Right. So
if it's not in the car, it's not in his pocket, it's not at home. Where else did he go? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's suspicious. Investigative journalist Stephen Janis shows up now, and he tells us that shortly after Ray's body was found, he went through the Belvedere and talked to everyone he could. There was not a single witness, not to Ray being in the building, not to him falling. This was odd, but I don't know what to make of it. Ray's brother Angel says that he tried sneaking through the Belvedere building and tried to get up to the top without anyone seeing him, and he said that it's not possible unless you knew the building. He doesn't see how you could do it, because there's locked stairways everywhere. The Belvedere itself is kind of a labyrinth. There's private areas throughout, so it's not like you can just go up a secret stairway and just get to the roof, and then the entrance to the roof is locked at all times. So the fact that no one saw someone just like wandering around trying to find their way to the roof is weird. And as far as we know, Ray had never been in the Belvedere before, or if he had, he didn't know all of the secret passageways.
I mean, it's a staffed building. I'm assuming these are very expensive condominiums. So there are people there specifically to keep other people from just wandering in. Like, they don't want people loitering or hiding in stairwells or, whatever. So I'm sure if you just go in and are wandering around, someone's going to come up and ask, oh, how can I help you? Because they don't want you there.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that no one in this huge building saw a random guy, like I said, opening up doors trying to find his way to the top of the building is very strange.
A random, very tall guy.
Right. Yeah, I think this is something you would notice. So very odd. The next odd thing is that there's no surveillance camera footage of Ray at all. It's not clear how many cameras are in the Belvedere. There was one on the roof that was disconnected. This may or may not be suspicious. Surveillance cameras are disconnected all the time.
Yeah, I don't actually find that suspicious. I bet at some point they were like, why do we even have this on the roof?
Right.
And it seems like people would go up to the roof to smoke. There was like chairs up there. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of wondering if someone turned it off because, I don't know, they were doing something else they weren't supposed to be doing. I'm guessing that had been off for quite a while.
Yes, probably. So, but it is unfortunate that there was no surveillance camera footage.
That would have been really helpful.
There's no proof that he was even in the building. It's like he dropped out of the sky. So, despite all of the strange things about this case and the family's conviction that it was foul play, the police continue to call Ray's death a suicide. And it's not clear to me if this was an official ruling, but the police do. So. The police do, at least when asked, say that they think it's a suicide. Of course, the family rejects this, and Jane Miller basically says, look, no one's accepting suicide. That's just a fact, obviously. But the case wasn't moving anywhere because there's no substantial evidence that could take you in any direction. Allison went to meet with the medical examiner, and according to her, the medical examiner closed the door to her office and said, I know what they're trying to do, and we're not closing this case. But unfortunately, the medical examiner doesn't give us a lot to go on. They did release a report that said that the fractures in Ray's legs are not consistent with a fall. However, they don't really say what could have been the cause or what it was consistent with.
I feel like the body was too decomposed for them to have anything like too helpful.
Yeah,
so they have to go with like bone damage.
Right. The medical examiner's report declares Ray's death undetermined. So next, Allison says that her and the family combed through their house trying to find any trace of evidence, anything that might help them figure out what happened. And that is when they found the note. This note was taped to the back of Ray's computer, and the note is very strange. It is typed and printed, but shrunk down to very small text. Ray's wife says that she knows he wrote the note the day he disappeared because there were scraps of like other versions of the note in the trash can. You can find, and I should have mentioned this earlier, you can find all of the evidence they have. Unsolved Mysteries is putting in this Google Drive that you can get to, and in there, one of the interesting things I found that they just recently released is the fall trajectory analysis. Like they had a mathematician or someone like crunch the numbers as far as like where the hole was to the height of the building. Like, it's very interesting. I don't know anything about math, but it seems legit to me. So you can look at that. You can also look at photos of the note. So
let's talk about that.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about with the note. So first I'm just going to go through like a little bit about what they tell us in the show about the note, which is that it begins, brothers and sisters, right now around the world volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight. Whom virtue unites, death will not separate.
We should start opening the show that way.
Apparently this last part is a Masonic phrase. I don't know. Another part of the letter reads, I stand before you a man who understands the purpose and value of our secrets. That's why I cherish them as secrets. In this letter, Ray names people who have died, including actor Christopher Reeve and filmmaker Stanley Kubrick. It also contains a long list of people Rivera knew and was related to, with a request to make them and himself 5 years younger. He also says...
Did you look at this list of names?
I didn't, actually.
Okay. If you look at... They don't point this out on the show. But if you look at the list of names, there's this whole list of names, and they've blacked out people's last names for privacy reasons, obviously. But then if you go all the way down, there's a space, and then it says, Porter Sansbury, parentheses, if he didn't do it himself.
Interesting.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
And I was like, why did they mention that on the show?
I don't know. Yeah, that's weird. That's super
That's
weird.
what I found last night, and I was like, okay. Which found, I mean, it's like right there. But if on in the drive, looking at the note, and I was like, okay, like, let's think about this.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these theories. That is so weird. That is so weird. I did not look at the actual list of names. That's really
because it seems really boring. Like, it's literally just names of people you don't know. But then at the bottom, it says, Porter Sansbury, if he didn't do it himself. What does that mean?
So there are theories. I pulled up an article. This is from Radio Times, and I like this article because it lays out sort of the like overarching theories that people have come up with, mostly on Reddit. So the first theory is that Rivera's note was linked to David Fletcher's movie The Game. Did you read about this?
I mean, yeah, I don't buy that, but go on.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy this either, but it is interesting. So one of the theories links Rivera's death to David Fletcher's film The Game, which features a character dying in a similar way to Rivera. The theory, posted on Reddit, points out that a connection between the note left behind by Rivera and the Great Fall, which initially appeared to cause his demise, although the forensic team determined that the cause of death was undetermined. This internet detective noted that The Game was listed in Rivera's note, which referenced the Freemasons and family friends as well as films, blah, blah, blah. The 1997 film follows a man who participates in a scheme which blurs his concept of reality and ends with him jumping from the roof of a building through a glass ceiling. And the theory suggests that Rivera was copying the events in the film. Not really sure.
But what that doesn't make any sense. So the movie is this really rich guy, played by Michael Douglas. You know, he's like bored with life. And for his birthday, his brother gets him this participation in this very elaborate game, right? Yep. That's like involves the whole city. Like, it's like, you know, whatever. It's just like elaborate scheme. But at some point, people are coming to him and telling him, no, it's not just a game. Like, your life is in danger, blah, blah, blah. And so he doesn't know, like, to what extent it's a game and to what extent this is like this real crime or something bad's going to happen to him. So he doesn't know what's real and what's fake. And it ends up with him for some reason jumping off of this roof. But no one is going to set up all these elaborate things that could only happen in a movie for Rivera. Like, I can't even remember the like weird stuff that happens, but it's like literally stuff that could only happen in a movie. And
right. The other thing is
who's setting that up? Like, he it's not like Michael Douglas just goes and jumps off a roof. That's the game. It's like he gets tricked through this series of cons, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't feel one-to-one to me, and I mean, it is interesting, but Rivera was obsessed with films, and what we learned from his wife is that he was constantly jotting down thoughts that were random and not necessarily connected, so it's not that unusual that he maybe was thinking about this film and he jotted something down. It is unusual that they think this note was written on the day he died and he fell through a roof, but I don't know.
think the note in and of itself is not that weird. I think when I die, if you go through all my stuff and you flip through all my notebooks and just random shit I've jotted down and you try to make sense of it as a coherent thing, like, good luck, because that's not how it was intended to be read. But
this note was printed out, shrunk down, folded up, and taped to the back of a computer on the day he fell through a roof.
What's weird. So because I have never taped any of my random doodles and things I've jotted down and like ideas for creative projects and whatever, and then going, I'm gonna tape this to the back of my computer.
Right. And
why?
His wife Allison says that he would fill composition notebooks up with his random thoughts. But this wasn't a note they found in his composition notebook. This was a note they found weirdly taped to the back of a computer weeks after he had died. Like, this isn't something he normally did. He wasn't taping notes places. They just happened to find it when they were like, had nowhere else to turn and were just tearing their house apart. So
I'm not surprised that this guy liked the game, because his list of movies are pretty shitty movies. And actually, the game is like kind of decent if you don't think about it too much. It's like, I don't know. It's a good like VHS era thriller. I enjoyed watching it, but it's not like profound. I wouldn't like put it on a list of like, this movie changed my life. But he's like talking about how like M. Night Shyamalan is going to keep making great movies, and we all know that's not true. We all know that's not true.
Okay, we have the benefit of hindsight. Okay, so if you think that theory was strange, listen to this one, which is that Ray's note is written in code. So another...
That was actually my immediate first thought before I like thought about it more. I went, oh, this is code.
Because you would think, except that his wife says that he had a tendency to just write down random thoughts that...
But did he have a tendency to type up random thoughts and then tape them to the back of his computer?
Well, no. That is, again, the weird part that we can't get back. So another internet detective believes that the note is written in code. For example, some users have converted the text into a number using the Jewish grammar... How do you pronounce this? Gematria? It's some sort of number system.
Okay.
In which every letter is given a number. The opening line, brothers and sisters, for example, has a score of 1398. The other phrases that have the same numbering sequence are follow the white rabbit, the Lord Jesus Christ, and possessed by the devil.
Okay, that's literally anything then.
What does that mean? I don't know. But apparently using this numbering system...
Hello, brothers and sisters makes more sense. He has both. I don't even know if he has a sister, but that makes more sense than saying whatever about Satan.
Follow the white rabbit, the Lord Jesus Christ, or possessed by the devil. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I reject that theory.
Could be written in code. Theory number 3 is that Ray was linked to the Freemasons.
Okay, this theory is fun, but I also reject it. He was into the Freemasons. He had just bought a book called Freemasons for Dummies. Yeah. But I want to point out, that was the level of interest that he was at. Freemasons for Dummies.
Yeah, I don't know.
He wasn't an expert on the Freemasons. He wasn't seconds away from joining the Freemasons or exposing the Freemasons. He literally was reading a book with 4 dummies in the title. And I guess he called someone at the Freemason Lodge that day to like inquire about how people went about joining. But I think that was because he wanted to write a screenplay.
I was going to say, he just wanted to write a screenplay about that. Like, that could easily be explained. But one of the popular theories...
4 dummies. That's the level he was at.
One of the popular theories connects Ray to the Freemasons due to the language used in the note. His wife, Allison, put the opening line into Google, and it came up with pages on the Freemasons. And in the documentary, Rivera's family and friends said his fascination with the Freemasons centered on their reputation as an organization with secrets, which again is just an interesting way to start a screenplay.
But at that point, you could say I was interested in the Freemasons. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Actually, I do come from a line of Masons, so. Everyone.
So there is like a local news report or something. There were more details on Rivera's interest in the Freemasons. In the report, it was stated that Rivera had talked with a member of the Freemason Lodge to inquire about joining, like Liz said. And on the weekend before his disappearance, he spent time reading the book, The Builders, A Study of Masonry. They add that on the day of Rivera's disappearance, he went to a bookstore and bought the book Freemasons for Dummies. So this again just could easily be research for.
It's just research. He just needs to know what the symbols mean and like the vague joining process and whatever, so he can like figure out where his screenplay is going to go.
Right. So
he's
theory 4.
He's not an expert. He's not sneaking into the place. He's not, working on he's not working on a tell-all book about the Masons. He's literally going to write some story about some naive person joining the Masons and then finding out they do blood sacrifices or something.
So theory 4 is that Ray's note spells out the word help. One Reddit user has suggested that the words in the letter say that the words the letter says is not as important as how the letter looks. Instead, they note that the shape of the paragraphs could be spelling out the word help. In a comment posted on the social media site, a viewer wrote along with the image of the note that has been annotated, which says, "Does anyone else pick up on how the formation of the text shape / the shape of the note spells out help?" Take a look at that. Let me know what you think. Does it spell help?
No.
I don't think it does. I didn't notice that at all. But I think...
No. That's so... That's
it's
like...
weird. Why would it say help? Help with what? I don't know. So
why would he tape it to the back of a computer then? Who's going to see it? It's all folded up and small. What? Why? Why?
That one makes no sense. So the last theory, which is basically that the note isn't sinister at all, is just that the letter is a set of notes for a screenplay. One of the less sinister theories is that Ray's letter might have been a set of notes for a screenplay he may have been working on before he passed. Ray did work as a writer, and his friends commented on his unique way of thinking in the documentary, saying that he was always working on a play or a story. That's frequently what he was jotting down, and these notes that he was jotting down to himself rarely connect, were always random. So in and of itself, and maybe it was like he thought this was the greatest idea in the world, and that's why he was like hiding it behind his computer. I don't know, but like, anyway, the note is weird, and it adds a lot of intrigue to the story.
When I first watched this, I thought it was irrelevant. I thought, like, yeah, it's a coincidence that this happens to be the day he died. Yeah, it's weird that he taped it to the back of his computer, but whatever. It's just a note. It's just like him scribbling down ideas. It's like not connected to his death. But I'm not sure I think that anymore.
It's
Go
weird.
on.
It's very weird.
It's very weird.
We don't have much more about the note, but now in the documentary, we get to the theories. A lot of suspicion is levied at Ray's employer and supposed friend, Porter Stansberry.
I mean, how can there not be? He works for a suspicious company. His name is Porter Stansberry. Yeah. He only could cough up $1,000 as a reward. That doesn't sound like someone that wants to find his friend at all.
Right, exactly.
His lifelong friend that moved out there for him. Oh, here's $1,000.
Yeah. The night Ray disappeared, Claudia heard him take a phone call and exclaim, "Oh," before running out of the house in a great hurry. Police traced that call and discovered that it came from Stanberry and Associates.
Huh.
Interesting.
And then he went to that part of town, you say?
Interesting. However, the police could not determine who made the call because it went through a switchboard. And additionally, the minute the body was found, an investigative reporter, Stephen, who we met earlier, started making inquiries at Stansberry. Stansberry issued a gag order on all of their employees, forbidding them from talking about Ray's death with anyone.
Okay, so I read a little bit about this on Reddit. This is the information I got from people who are supposedly lawyers on Reddit. I don't know. But
okay.
What the gag order means is not quite so literal. It means that Stansberry himself probably lawyered up, didn't want to talk, and that in general, the employees of Stansberry and Associates have a non-disclosure agreement that they're supposed to talk to PR before talking to anyone. Which is would be pretty common at a financial company, or maybe most companies, that you're not supposed to talk about the company without getting permission to do so.
Yeah, I guess that does make sense. And I was wondering about the legality of this. That does make more sense, because it was weird to me that a company
seems very sinister.
Order
it's like
on their whole employee, like all of their employees.
Yeah, I think that term is being used loosely to say that nobody at the company wanted to talk to the cops.
Sure, that does make sense. I don't know though that like it really makes Porter less suspicious to me, because what Allison says is this was supposedly your lifelong friend, and the minute his body is found, you lawyer up. Like, no, I understand not talking to the cops, trust me, but this is very unusual behavior.
Yeah, very unusual. No, I'm not defending Porter himself. I'm just saying that the phrase gag order is maybe not as suspicious as it seems. Yeah, it does seem like Porter was not very invested in finding his friend, and maybe, I don't know, wasn't that keen on finding who did it.
Yeah. It's very suspicious. Detective Breyer says that what this type of case really needs is a grand jury and people being subpoenaed and forced to answer questions. However, it seems as if he was just one homicide detective and basically the only person pushing to keep investigating the case. It seems like everyone else in the force decided it was suicide, and that was that.
They were happy to close it.
Yeah, he says that Ray's best friend, Porter Stanberry, would not even return his calls.
It is weird.
So, it's weird. It is.
You would think that maybe Porter could go to the police station with his lawyer and talk to them,
or at least call him back. You know what I mean? Like, he said he would not even return his calls. Like, he wasn't going to arrest him. He wasn't even at that point asking him to come to the police station. Just like calling him, and he wouldn't even.
I would say people probably shouldn't talk to the police without a lawyer, but that doesn't mean he couldn't have spoken to the police with a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
He can afford a lawyer.
Yes. And of all people, this guy is, I'm going to say, not in that much danger from the police. So I can't imagine that he was that concerned about, you know what I mean? Like,
probably get oppressed very little. His rights are probably fine. Yeah.
I don't know that his motivation to not talk to the police would be the same motivation as everybody else would have for not talking to the police.
That's fair, yeah.
So the fact that he doesn't even call this guy back is highly suspicious to me, and I think everyone else. Stephen, the investigative reporter, describes Ray's job at Stanberry writing this newsletter called the Rebound Report, which gives tips for buying stocks that aren't doing well but might rebound in the future. Now, before Ray joined Stansberry had put out this letter under a firm called Pirate Investors.
Sounds very legit to me.
Yeah, that's not suspicious at all. And this letter touted investments in a Russian firm that he said was going to, quote, discover uranium or something. Not exactly sure the details, but essentially the tip did not work out. It wasn't legit, and investors who had taken this advice started complaining, and the SEC ended up filing fraud charges against Stansberry, and then eventually did levy fines at them over $1 million. So basically what they said was that this advice, like, it's not illegal to give bad advice necessarily, but that this was like fraudulent advice, and like it was clearly, you know, they were
Maybe that's why Porter only had $1,000 left.
Maybe he had to pay $1 million. Allison says that 2 weeks before he died, something seemed to be worrying Ray. The day before he disappeared, the alarm in their house went off, which was something that had never happened before. Ray's response, she thought, was very odd. She said, flew out of the bedroom with a baseball bat, and she said that the fear she saw in him scared her because he wasn't ever scared of anything. Like, he just wasn't the type of person that would respond that way.
He was a big, strong guy. He probably didn't need to be scared a lot of the time.
Right, exactly. And then the following Tuesday, it happened again. And then the second time it happened, it was clear that someone had tampered with the window. So that was very unusual. Unfortunately, that's where I stopped taking notes, because there's not much more to the case. It's just a mystery. And the very last part of the episode is just hearing from his family about how much his death devastated them and how they, you know, they're convinced it's not a suicide, and they are hoping that someone has some information that might lead investigators somewhere.
This man was truly loved. His family loved him. Yeah.
Yeah, his family and friends adored him, and it's just really, really sad. He wanted to start a family, and yeah, I don't know. It's horrible, and there aren't updates on this case that I found other than people's theories about the note. It doesn't seem like anyone has gotten anywhere with this one yet, but these reboot episodes are generating a lot of buzz, and maybe something will come of it. You said that you were of two minds. Do you want to talk about your thoughts on what happened to Ray?
Yes. So originally when I watched this, I was leaning the direction I think Unsolved Mysteries is pointing you towards, which is Porter. I think they introduce him early on as this, rich guy who brings them out to Baltimore even though they don't know anybody, who is not around when he goes missing, right? And then they're like, oh, he refused to talk to us. And just being who I am, I was like, yeah, it's that rich white guy. 100%. 100%. And I think the show, obviously it doesn't want to get in any legal trouble. It's not literally saying we think it's Porter, but I think it's edited in a way to make you think that, right?
Sure.
Then last night, when I started looking up too much stuff, I came across an Ask Me Anything with the author Makita Brotman, who wrote a book about this case called An Unexplained Death, The True Story of a Body at the Belvedere. Oh. And that taught me a few things that were not in the episode.
Okay.
So one is that Ray had taken out a substantial cash advance on his wife's credit card. That she didn't know about all of it. So he had taken out $15,000 that she was unaware of. Now, that seems to be to get like video equipment, because he had stopped officially working for Stansbury and Associates and was becoming like a freelance videographer for them.
Okay. Yeah.
And he needed some equipment. So it seems like he didn't necessarily tell his wife that he was going to need this money to like make this job change. So that's I don't know. Is that a little bit suspicious? Maybe.
I don't know that it's
suspicious,
but it. You know what? People, especially if you're not in a good mental state and you have this like secret. I mean, it's not like a devastating secret, I wouldn't think, but like, or something that she wouldn't be able to get over. But it does.
It makes him seem slightly less stable than he seemed in the episode, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people were theorizing that he had like used that money to inflate stocks for Porter. I think he took out like 70 grand overall and only 15 that his wife didn't know about, something like that. But honestly, that's like not that much money to finance people. Like, I don't know that you can really manipulate stocks with like 15 grand.
Yeah.
So I don't really put a lot of stock in that theory. So for it writing this book, she hired a physicist to figure out the whole thing.
Okay.
And according to her, the physicist determined the way that hole is made is that he made a running jump off the roof. Mm-hmm. That he was running 11 miles an hour, jumped off. That would explain the trajectory.
Off the roof of the Belvedere? Like the very top?
Yes.
Okay.
And that apparently the windows for like the 11th ledge, those don't even like open, which they kind of like alluded to. That would have been hard to get up there, but it seems like it actually would have been impossible. Mm-hmm. So according to her, that hole has to be made by him taking a running jump.
I mean, he fell from one of those roofs. Like he didn't just drop from the sky. So
some people think that. Some people think Porter pushed him out of a helicopter.
Okay, I don't believe that.
Which apparently he had access to a helicopter, and apparently helicopters flew by the Belvedere all the time. I kind of think someone might have noticed that, but whatever. The guy that discovered the body, that's what he thinks happened. I had originally been thinking Porter threw him out a window. He was already dead. Because they can't determine, exactly when he died because of the decomp, right? Like, he's in there for a few days in this hot room.
But how would Porter get a dead body up to the top of the Belvedere with no one noticing?
Okay, I'm assuming he killed him in the Belvedere. And then I was like, well,
okay. Well, maybe.
I need to know the property holdings. Does anyone that works for Stansbury own a condo in the Belvedere?
Yeah.
Is he killed in the Belvedere and then thrown out a window, assuming it would look like suicide, not knowing he was going to go through that roof, which is weird. I wouldn't expect that to happen.
Right.
So I was thinking he's already dead. They broke his legs, whatever, threw him out a window. Because Stansbury never talks to anybody. I don't know if he owns any property in that. Maybe that's a leap. But that seemed like the most likely thing to me.
Sure.
But if we're saying the only way that hole is made is that he took a running jump off of that roof, then I think I have to go with the theory that he had a psychotic break. And the note is evidence of that. But I feel shitty speculating about someone's mental health like that. There's not a lot of evidence for that either. There's people saying, oh, he's acting paranoid 2 weeks before. It's like, yeah, but also someone's trying to break into his house. Like,
right.
Like, I feel like if he was really acting very irrationally, his wife, who I feel like loved him, wouldn't have gone on this business trip. So
yeah, she did not think anything was weird until he disappeared.
Right. And then retroactively looking back, she's like, oh, he was acting, kind of paranoid or whatever. But is that connected? Who knows? Maybe that's just a break-in. So it would have had to be like a very sudden, I don't know, psychotic episode.
But people do die by suicide and no one sees it coming. Everyone thinks this person had it's not an unusual thing to happen where people don't see red flags. People can hide these things pretty easily from their loved ones. And especially if you're typically just like a happy dude, people don't think to notice small changes in your behavior, perhaps. Like, it's not that unusual. But again, it's weird. But again,
weird.
It's weird. How can you say that?
It's weird that he goes to this place he doesn't really have a emotional connection to. It's weird that he doesn't leave a note for his family to find. He clearly loved his family.
Yeah, that's weird.
It is weird. And I wonder if maybe we don't know enough about suicidal intent or, suicidal thoughts to really make sense of his behavior. So they did send the note to the FBI to have it analyzed. And they said, no, this is not a suicide note. But I guess they did say this could be a sign of severe mental illness, but maybe not, right? That's just kind of a guess.
Who knows? He was also an intensely creative person and is always coming up with random ideas for screenplays. So again, it could be that too. That's what's so hard to parse out about this, because there isn't that much to go on.
I would be interested to read this woman's book. So she sort of said that I think she was in the Belvedere when this happened. I think she lived there and just became intensely curious about it. And originally was like, no way this is suicide. There's something weird about this. But she felt like she had, sort of exhausted all other possibilities. And it just came back to the simplest option. It's probably the right option. Yeah. And that probably means that it's suicide, even though it's weird.
Right.
I don't know. I want to know more about Porter.
I know. So do I. And it's, yeah.
And I guess he did speak to the producers of Unsolved Mysteries because they tried to convince him to come on, and so he declined to be filmed or whatever. He did talk to them, but he didn't actually want to be part of the show, which is understandable, but that doesn't help us.
No, not exactly.
It doesn't help us, the armchair detectives that are totally going to solve this mystery. It was interesting to me that looking through Reddit, I thought everybody was going to be like, Porter, let's get him. Get the guillotine ready. But a lot more people were going with the psychotic break idea. And I also don't like this jump in logic that was like, he's mentally ill, therefore he jumped off a roof. That's not a clear line. Some people want to say, if you have mental illness, you will jump off a roof. That's not the way that works at all. Most people have some form of mental illness. Most people do not jump off high roofs. Yeah.
And also, like you said, he had no connection to the Belvedere. He had no, other than working in this area.
In the same area.
And why did he take a phone call and run out of the house?
Okay, there's also, I almost forgot, that a few days before, he had called Porter and left a message that said something like, I got it all figured out. And apparently Porter said he didn't know what that meant.
Okay.
And that does sort of sound like someone having a break. Because you start to think you have like figured everything out, but really you're losing your mind.
Yeah, you get paranoia would be not uncommon in this situation.
Or that's him being like, oh, I figured it out. I'm going to do this with my videography thing. Like, it's so vague. It's so vague. It can mean anything. It's like, oh, I figured it out. You're a giant juice bag. I don't want to be friends with you anymore. Like, could be anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, the phone call, I feel like the phone call is the thing that most makes me think, no, that's not a psychotic break.
Right, because it came from Stansbury, and then where he ended up dying was in the area of town where Stansbury was.
And nobody has admitted to making that call. And apparently there's multiple calls from the office that day, and no one has admitted to making them. So I don't know if they have some sort of internal call logs of like whose desk calls the switchboard when. I don't know if they track that sort of information, but that would be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't quite decide now.
I feel like I'm in the same boat as you. It's so weird.
It's a very strange, very intriguing case. It's very sad. His family seems so lovely, and yeah, they just clearly loved him so much. And it's a tragedy either way. It's just whether or not someone else is responsible.
Yeah. Where's his money clip? I mean, there's just like
that's another thing. That's another thing.
Well, what about this? But then what about this? But then what about that? That's what makes this so mysterious and why I got sucked in.
Apparently there is some time that can't really be accounted for. So he's leaving the house at like 6:30. They're estimating that he jumps off the roof or falls through the roof about 10 or something. So there are a few hours where it's not really sure where he went. And, you know, there's like a lot of bars in the area. There's a lot of restaurants in the area, whatever. Like maybe he left his money clip somewhere, but it's weird that no one would come forward with like, I get people took the money, like come forward with the clip. Come forward with like his ID or something.
Yeah.
Like that's weird that never showed up if he just like left it somewhere.
And it was like a very important piece to him. It wasn't like he got this wallet at Kmart, right? It's like
it's from his wedding, from his new wife that he loves.
Yeah. So the fact that it's not on his person or not found in the car is unusual. It's very unusual.
Yeah. Those are that's another thing that makes me go, well, maybe he didn't jump because where did that go? Unfortunately, if you're willing to just like dismiss someone as crazy, then you can like say like you can come up with anything for any of their actions because they're not acting rationally. Right. Be like, who knows? He threw it in a river. Like,
and I think that's what his family pushes back on, and rightly so. Is like, let's not dismiss this so easily.
Right. Well, at some point, a police officer tells her, like, you need to get it through your head, a police officer, that your husband committed suicide. And she's like, I'll get that through my head when you show me any evidence that that's what happened.
Yeah, and she's not wrong.
It doesn't seem like they did a very thorough investigation and they just wanted to close it. And I mean, is it too much TV to be like, oh, it's because people in power, like, want them to close it? Or is it just, like, way fucking easier to close it than it is to investigate it?
I think that's the case, honestly. And then the lead homicide detective who was on the case got transferred to like some safe streets bullshit. So he was no longer investigating it and no longer available to the family. It's
very intriguing.
An intriguing case for sure.
I would actually be interested in reading this woman's book about these other avenues that she explored that she decided weren't realistic. Okay, so should we move on to the second one?
Yeah, can we take a quick break?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm literally buying that book. Okay.
Are you really?
Yeah. Like,
nice.
I just kind of need to know. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about the second episode of the reboot, which is called 13 Minutes. And this is about the disappearance and eventual death of Patrice Enders. And we start off hearing from Pistol Black, who was her son. He was in the 10th grade at the time of this crime. which she disappears April 15th, 2004. So Pistol last sees his mom when she drops him off at school. He wanted to go in a little bit early to see his girlfriend. I think he's a sophomore in high school. You know, it's just like that's his priorities and that's his world. So later he is called into the office and the school officials ask him if he's spoken to his mother that day. And he says, no, I mean, he's been in school. So they ask, can he get in touch with her? So he calls her cell phone and she doesn't answer. And that happens 3 times, which apparently was very unusual for her. That would not be unusual for me, but she, you know, is an attentive mother. She's very involved in her son's life and always called him back immediately. And we hear that she like attended all of his games and, you know, she was just very devoted to her son. And she also worked as a hairstylist. She had opened her own salon. And she loved her work and she had developed a very loyal customer base in town. And we first hear about her husband, Rob, when we learn from one of her friends that he helped her get that business started. And I'm assuming that's just from like a financial point of view. I don't think he like, so. I don't know. I don't know that he was in there like painting the walls or anything. When we first see Rob, he's working on a car, which I feel like might be a clue. And he tells us that when he met Patrice, she was 30 and he was 50. And that he was, quote, the luckiest man on this planet. He met her. Originally, she was working at a salon and he came in and just needed a haircut. That's how they met. And he immediately was like, this is the woman I'm going to marry.
Is there a more unlikable person than Rob?
No, like, seriously, no. Like, ever? From the very beginning, you're just like,
Like, and then why are you smiling so much, Rob? Like, immediately, you're like, wipe that smile off your face. Be a little somber. A woman is dead. We're trying to figure out what happened to her.
The contrast between, okay, so Pistol Black, you know, we're hearing from him. So he's in high school in 2004. I'm not sure exactly how old he is now. What, late 20s? The contrast between him, who's a somber man who clearly had to grow up too fast and is haunted by this. The contrast between him talking about the loss of his mother and this weird, smiling old man talking about the loss of his wife. The contrast between those things is sharp.
It's like, so... Rob looks practically giddy. It's so weird.
He's really happy to be on TV, whereas Pistol, look, you can't get a name better than Pistol Black. Pistol Black is having trouble talking about this because it's the worst thing that ever happened to him or ever will happen to him. It's the worst possible outcome that something would happen to his mother.
Yeah. And then the aftermath of it is like...
It's dredging up horrible memories for him that he will be dealing with for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, this creepy old grinning dude is like, what do you want to know? I'm an open book. Like, nope. Okay, so we learned a little bit more about Patrice. She clearly was a people person, unlike myself. She's very outgoing. Like, the perfect person to be a hairstylist, right? She wants to talk to everybody. She wants to know everybody's business. People love just hanging out at her salon. It was just like a little social hub for the women in town who were, you know, all very loyal customers. And she's first reported missing from a client that shows up to the salon for their appointment. She's not there, so they call 911. And I have to say that the police take this case seriously immediately.
I was surprised by this, honestly.
Yeah, there wasn't a like, no, you got to wait 48 hours, no, blah, blah, blah. And I
think this is because it was such a small town. Like, the police, someone called and was like, not, this person is missing. They said, oh, Patrice is not here. Like, the police knew who she was.
I think that helps. I'm sure they probably knew Patrice and they knew that she
probably cut their hair.
And, yeah. So that probably helps. I honestly think the fact that the cash register is open and the cash is missing is helpful because it's not just a potential missing person. You also have this robbery angle. Like,
sure.
Who cares that, you know, the $50 at the salon got stolen? But it does mean there's a crime to investigate immediately instead of saying, like, oh, maybe she's going to come back any minute. You know what I mean?
That does make sense. Yeah.
So as I said, the cash register is open and empty. Her purse is still there, though, on the counter. Her lunch is set out by the microwave as if she was in, like, the process of heating up her lunch. But there's no sign of a struggle. And the officer that we hear from, who's the main person we hear from, but I actually forgot to write down his name. It talks about she's just, like, you know, she kept a tidy shop. Like, It's a well-kept place. She had a lot of pride in her business, and there's not like a sign of a struggle. There's not things out of place. So Rob now tells us that he was at work when Patrice went missing, and then really smugly says that he has a degree in criminology, and you're sort of like, okay, like what does that have to do with anything? Okay. So one of the clues for this is that Patrice's car was not in her usual spot, which begs the question, did she move it? Did someone else move it? She usually backed into a spot right by the back door of the salon and left the like front spots for customers, right?
Right.
Well, her car is actually like up front. So people are wondering, was she giving someone a jump? Did someone come in the thing and say, hey, my car died, like, could you help me out? And so she moved her car, or did someone else move her car for some reason? Not sure. So the police searched the surrounding area, and this sounds like it was a big search. There was like helicopters, there was dogs, there was like, they took it very seriously. And partly because all of her friends and maybe even the police officers knowing her said she would never leave her son. There's no way that just today she was like, you know what? I'm going to start a new life. No, nobody thought that. So the police go on to create a timeline for the day that she disappears. So she arrives at the salon, and then her first client arrives at 8:50 and said that she did seem distracted. She wasn't like as talkative and attentive as usual. Was she just having a bad day? Is that actually like connected to anything? We don't know. That client leaves at 11:05. At 11:10, her second client arrives, which is a guy getting a haircut. He's only there for a few minutes because he leaves at 11:27. And that is confirmed. He got a phone call at that time, so we do know that he like actually left. Then at 11:35, a customer calls to change their appointment. Patrice answers the phone. She switches their appointment, but apparently she was like kind of short with them. She wasn't like as talkative as usual. Maybe that doesn't need anything. So the next call comes in at 11:50. So she answers the call at 11:35. She doesn't answer the call at 11:50. So that's why this episode is called 13 Minutes. The question for the police becomes, what happens in those 13 minutes? Why is she around to answer the phone at 11:35 but not by 11:50? The other piece of evidence is that around 11:45, two independent witnesses see another car in front of the shop. Both of these people saw a blue car. Both of these people saw shoulder-length hair from a stranger, a person they didn't know. One person says that this is a blue Chevy Lumina with Georgia wildlife plates. And I was like, this is the advantage of a small town. I would never, ever remember like what color car or what kind of plates someone had, but this is clearly everybody's in everybody's business, right?
Yeah. So you notice. I haven't seen that car around town.
Right. So
who's parked in front of Patrice's place?
She's probably got like, oh, I'm gonna go over to Patrice's later. Who's there right now? Oh, I don't know them. Yeah. That's weird, right? So that's one witness's description. Another person says it might have been a Ford Taurus, not a Chevy Lumina. There's a debate whether or not the person with shoulder-length hair is a man or a woman, but one witness says that they had hands on each other, that possibly they were being pushed or being helped up or something like physical is happening. She didn't really think much of it at the time. She's just driving by, but was that like a struggle? Or was that like
interesting?
She was like going to give someone a hug. You know what I mean? Like it could be a lot of different things this person, I feel really bad for her. She clearly feels incredibly guilty that she didn't stop. But I definitely think it's something that at the time you don't think anything of.
It wasn't like someone was being punched. It wasn't alarming to her at the time, but in hindsight, she was like, oh.
Who was that person? And why were they touching Patrice? And like, were they hurting her? Because now she's realizing she might be the last person who's seen Patrice alive.
Yeah.
Other than the murderer, and how troubling that is for her. But I was sort of like, lady, if you had stopped, you might be dead too. Like, you have no idea.
Exactly.
Like, oof. Okay.
Didn't one witness think they saw two people in front of the Lumina?
Yeah, actually, that's true. One person also thought they saw an older person. Like, someone with gray hair.
Interesting. Don't know what it means, but it's interesting.
Then we hear from Pistol that he was 8 years old when Patrice and Rob got married, and that Rob was apparently like a fine stepdad for the first year and was nice to him. But after a while, the script kind of flipped and he started putting Pistol down a lot and would apparently say crude things to him when Patrice wasn't around. Like he would walk past his room and he didn't give an example, but like say demeaning things, even if like Pistol's friends were around to witness it and they were kind of like, what the fuck is up with your stepdad? Like, why?
How shitty is this?
Why would he say these things to you? And he was just kind of like, I don't know. And that this had gone on for years. And that, so according to Pistol, Rob was very protective and jealous of Patrice and didn't like her having friends, didn't like her being so popular, didn't like that she was so doting to her son, right? And that this caused them to fight a lot. Then we get Rob claiming that Pistol was jealous, which doesn't make any sense. I have to say.
It really doesn't. I don't know. That would be very weird. Also, he just has this cookie cutter. Patrice didn't discipline Pistol, which is like, okay, whatever.
Well, we hear from Patrice's friends saying Rob is a jealous man. Like Rob, didn't like Patrice giving attention to anyone else. We don't have anyone else to support Rob's claim that Pistol was jealous, which also is like nonsense. And then he says, I didn't see any future in him, to tell you the truth. We're talking about someone that's like 15.
Yeah, just this phrase alone, I think, tells us all we need to know about how he treated Pistol, to be honest.
I didn't see any future in him. This is your wife's child. And supposedly you love your wife and your wife loves her son. Like, what's wrong with you? All right. So we hear from her friends and also Pistol that a couple of weeks prior to her disappearance, she started telling people that she was going to divorce Rob. She wasn't happy anymore. They were fighting a lot. And it does seem like, Rob's true colors had started to come through with the way that, at least with the way that he's treating Pistol and maybe the way he's treating her. This is when we get one of the most incendiary pieces of evidence, which is that the day Patrice goes missing, Rob changes the locks on the house.
This is really something else. And his excuse, his explanation is, it does not hold water, in my opinion.
He didn't even let Pistol in to get a change of clothes. This is a teenager who's lost his mother, who has no idea what's going on, and he can't get in his own house to get a change of clothes, I don't know, to get work for school, to get his fucking toothbrush, like anything.
This is the day she's missing. Not the day she's found dead. This is the day she goes missing. And you're like, all right, you can't come in this house anymore? She could have come back that night. You don't know where she is.
Rob claims that this was a precautionary measure, but then goes on to say, I didn't want him in the house because I didn't like him.
Yeah, those are contradictory statements, Rob.
He wants us to think that it's for Pistol's safety, but then kind of admits, like, yeah, I didn't want him here. How pissed is your wife going to be when she gets home, tells you this crazy story of how someone came by, needed help, she jumped in, whatever. She's been gone all day. Her phone was dead. She had to deliver a baby on the side of the road. Like, who knows? Right?
Let's and you're like, oh, I kicked out your son because I assumed you were never coming back. What?
Assume, there's a scenario where Patrice comes back and she's fine, and this has just all been a big misunderstanding. I'm sorry, you didn't let my son in his own house? To the extent that you called a locksmith and you changed the locks, meaning I couldn't even get in? I've been gone for a few hours, Rob. Like, no.
Yeah, no.
So Pistol, having nowhere to go, really went to go live with his biological father. Apparently, his biological father and Patrice were still actually very good friends, and they spoke on the phone every day. So he was quite upset about Patrice's disappearance. Pistol, being a teenager, and also this is just probably like natural, he's hoping that Patrice has run away to start a new life without Rob, and she's going to come back and get him. That she's going to be like, look, this is what I had to do to get away from that guy. He's a creep. You could go stay with your father, but now I've set up this like new life. We don't need him anymore, blah, blah, right?
Right.
Okay, at this point, we hear about a couple other suspects. Cops investigated serial killer Gary Mitchell Hilton, who had killed people in that area. I don't know that I talked about this, but this is taking place in Georgia. Anyway, so he had killed people in that area. He was also known to con people out of money, and one of his favorite spots to hit up was hair salons, which he preferred to do at lunchtime. And we're told Gary Hilton doesn't need a motive. He hunts for people. He hunts for opportunities. So there's not any actual evidence connecting Gary Michael Hilton to the crime, but he is in that vicinity, and it kind of seems like something he would do. We also learn about Jeremy Jones, who had been arrested in Mobile, Alabama. They sort of explain that this guy like seems really charming at first, and then he's actually a serial killer. And the way the cop said that was he's like most people, he likes to hunt and fish. Like, don't worry, you'd like this guy. He likes hunting. I was like, all right, I am clearly not from Mobile, Alabama. But Jeremy Jones is guilty of 6 to 8 murders. They're not sure exactly. And as he was confessing after his arrest in Alabama, he said that he also needed to confess to a hairdresser in Georgia. And then confessed to the murder of Patrice Enders. And we see some footage of him confessing where he says that he could become the evilest, cruelest person in the world, and describes his change in personality like Heckle and Jekyll.
Mm-hmm.
Which, just please support the education program in this country.
Heckle and Jekyll.
It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's not Heckle and Jekyll. It's like some puppets or something. Okay. So he said that he told Patrice he needed to jump for his car and then forced her into the car, that he murdered her and threw her in Sweetwater Creek. Search teams went to Sweetwater Creek and they didn't find any evidence this is true. He later recanted his confession. It kind of seems like Jeremy Jones is the sort of person that wants credit for murders he didn't do. They're not sure exactly how many murders he actually did. So he's still considered a suspect in this case, but there's actually no evidence connecting him to the crime either. And he's recanted his confession. So now we get to 20 months after Patrice's disappearance. It's now September 6, 2005, and her body is found. It's found by 2 volunteers who are working on expanding a church. They were like building a new room or building or something from their church. And while they were working on that project, they noticed some buzzards circling in the woods. And they're like, I wonder what that is. So they go out into the woods and they actually find a dead deer. But while they're looking at the dead deer, they go, and is that a human skeleton?
They saw a skull, like an intact
human skull lying there in the woods. Now, this is a very rural, remote area. I'm not sure there's much out there besides the church. So no one had necessarily been out this direction until they were like expanding the church that way. At this point, Pistol Black is now a senior in high school. So he gets like called down to the principal's office, which he said wasn't that unusual because obviously he wasn't a good student at this point because his mom's gone fucking missing and he's been kicked out of his own home. And that's when he is told that they found his mom, and he's like, oh, great, where is she? And they're like, no, kid, they found her remains.
Yeah.
So we learned that the police had cleared like the whole forest floor where the skull was found. So this is, like a remote treed area. There's like all these dead leaves and whatever on the ground. They cleared that all up so they could see the actual dirt and find the bones, which I thought was pretty impressive. And they found most of her skeleton. But it does. So it's it's kind of uneven terrain. It's not the like easiest place to access. So that brings up the question: was she carried in there, dead? Was she like dragged in there, dead or alive? Or did she walk in there alive and was killed? Like, was she killed in the woods or was she moved there later? At this point, Pistol flat out tells us that he thinks Rob was involved and he thinks that was motivated by the potential divorce. All of Patrice's friends say the exact same thing. Yep. All of them. Then Rob is exasperated and is like, well, I don't talk to people who think I killed Patrice because I have a time-stamped receipt from a gas station that's 45 minutes away. And I was kind of like, this place seems really small. Why were you at a gas station that's 45 minutes away? There's not a closer gas station?
Yeah, that was interesting. Although after getting gas, he went to work. Do you know how far away his work was from? Did he have to travel?
I don't know. He does clock in at work. So the cops say that they worked out a timeline for Rob, and it's not strictly impossible that he did it, but it's unlikely that he did it.
Yeah.
And there's no evidence that he's hired someone. Doesn't mean that he didn't, but they haven't found any evidence of that. At this point, Rob asks when she was killed and if she was kept captive for a while, and was she, quote, somebody's toy for a while, which is a fucking disgusting way to talk about your murdered wife.
It's disgusting. It's a disgusting thing to say.
It's not normal. That's not normal.
It's not normal. It's not a normal. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not a normal thought to have. It's bizarre.
It's a weird thing to say. And it's also weird to phrase it like that and it not be like, I hope she wasn't harmed. Right? Like that's, you would think you would say it in a much, milder language. That you would be like, I hope she didn't suffer. It's how we usually talk about something like that.
Yeah, a decent person would talk about it like that.
I hope she wasn't somebody's toy for a while, Like, ew. He also then says, did someone take a wheelbarrow and wheel her out there? I don't know. And then he kind of smiles like, maybe I said too much.
I don't know, Rob. Did they?
I don't know. Did they? The cop then says that at this point, he does not think that robbery is the primary motive. He thinks that it's just to, like, throw them off track. But he does say that Patrice's wedding ring was never found. Okay, now we take... You think... Well, yeah, that's weird, and we clearly know who did it. But it actually gets a little bit worse. At this point, we hear from the funeral director that handled Patrice's funeral. And he was asked by Rob to lay out her remains so he could spend some time with her.
Lay them out like exactly
like
as a skeleton.
Like something an anthropologist would do.
The funeral director does not think this is a strange request. At least he doesn't appear to think that.
I think that he's like, oh, a grieving family. I'll do whatever I can. I don't know that he's not charged with solving the mystery, right? He's charged with like helping the family through their grieving process. And this is what they've asked for. So, okay. So he lays out all of her bones as best as he can on a like folding table so Rob can see her. And he tells us, I picked up her skeleton, her head, and kissed her goodbye.
He says he walked around with the head for a while. Yeah. I've heard people describe this as dancing. It is not what he says in the show, so don't like fall for that meme. No. But he says he carried her head around for a while.
It does sort of seem like he reenacted some Hamlet. I think there's something to the weird. I think there's something to the Freudian slip that he says skeleton, but actually meant skull.
Yeah.
I think there is a point probably where he's picked up her body, but he's actually talking about the part where he kisses her skull. Someone on Reddit also pointed out, like, if you're picturing a skull, you're picturing like a bleached, white, clean skull that's like in a museum or in your like science classroom or something, right? Like, that's not this. This has
been in the woods.
This is a dirty skull that's been in the woods that might have hair still attached to it. Right? This is your wife's disgusting skull. It's not just a plain, oh, that's a human skull. How interesting. This is like your decayed wife, possibly with some of her hair and like who knows what.
Ugh. To carry it around and then kiss it? It almost seems like this is like made up. Like he thinks it's a totally normal thing to say,
it's so over the top. If you put this in a movie or a book, people would be like, we get it, he's guilty. Oh my God. It's like, there's a part in Silence of the Lambs where you see, this is just the briefest thing, but it's always bothered me. There's like a brief shot of Buffalo Bill's bed and he's got a swastika quilt on it. And I was just always like, I get it. He's bad. We don't need the swastika quilt. He's already killing people and making suits out of their skin. But that's kind of how this feels. It's a little much. You're laying it on a little thick when you get to the part where it's like, and then I held her skull and gave it a smooch. He also, I feel like this is kind of a Freudian slip too, that he says, that's the last time I saw Patrice anywhere near intact.
This was, I mean, there was moments before, but when he said this, I got chills.
I think that sort of implies he saw her dead body at some other point, right?
Yeah, that's sure what it sounds like. Look, this man is not gifted with words, but it really sounds like that.
That's the last time I saw Patrice anywhere near intact. That doesn't sound like the way that you talk about your deceased loved one.
No.
For sure. But it also sort of sounds like you're talking about you've seen her dead body at multiple stages. You know?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. This is the part that... This just keeps going, folks. I'm sure you already saw it, but this is the part that everybody is talking about. People who don't watch Unsolved Mysteries happen to watch the reboot and were contacting me like, did you see this fucking guy? Yes, I did. So we learned that when he got Patrice's ashes back, he slept with them in his bed for a year. And he says, she was like my teddy bear. The ashes are just like in a box.
A cardboard box and he pulls them out for the camera and it's just a bag.
He claims he's never taken the ashes out of the box prior to showing them to Unsolved Mysteries, and they're literally just like, you know, you go pick them up at the crematorium or whatever, and they hand you a box, and then usually, I mean, you can pay to like have them put them in an urn or whatever, but usually people sprinkle them somewhere, or they put them in a, you know, an urn or something in their house that they won't mind looking at. And then they go, oh, grandma's still with us. She's on the mantle, right? Now, not everyone gets like a decorative thing. My grandfather was cremated and we just buried him in the box that he came in because he was a very cheap man. And he would have been horrified if we paid money for something that was just going to be in the ground.
Sure.
But the fact that he's keeping us around his house just in that cardboard box and he was just sleeping with that in his bed, it's weird and troubling. And also the fact that he's referring it to his teddy bear when he's already been talking about someone abusing her like a toy.
It's so gross. It's so gross.
There has to be a connection between those things, right? If you're calling someone...
It sure seems like it. It sure seems like it.
He also then lets us know that he would never share those ashes with anyone, particularly Pistol. Why? That's her son that she loved. And then we learn that Pistol never got any of her things because this man is a monster. Yeah. And then it's just kind of like the end. And I hope, or I guess I don't hope. If I was Rob, I'd be locking my door because I think a lot of people watch this and a lot of people made assumptions about his guilt, including myself. So you might want to sleep with one eye open. People are furious that he didn't give like photos or anything to Pistol.
Rightfully nothing.
It's rightfully so. Whatever his biological dad had, that's it. He never got back in that house. He doesn't get back in that house until Unsolved Mysteries like arranges it. I think someone else owns it now, and he just like walks around to talk about the memories. He never saw that again after his mom disappeared. His home.
Horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear who I think did it. I don't know how much legally. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm not a court. It's not official. You know, he hasn't been tried.
Look, it's not like you're the first person to say this.
I think there are some loose ends. I don't know how you prove it. I think someone helped him. I have no idea who.
I mean, his alibi, right, is the one thing that you have to point at and be like, okay, but people have gotten help with these things before, and there were witnesses that saw people outside her shop moments before she disappeared.
The witnesses, if they had seen Rob, they would have recognized Rob. Right. There's a small town. I don't get this sense that at least one of those witnesses even liked Rob. I think if she could say it was him, she would. So I do think Rob's car
outside her shop.
I mean, part of his alibi is just a receipt, which he's very determined to point out to you as timestamped. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's how receipts work. They all have times and dates on them. Otherwise, they would be useless. Just like, that's not special. Which does make me think that's sort of establishing an alibi thing. The fact that the first shot they show of him is working on a car made me go, oh, somehow he had access to other cars. Somehow he has access to a blue 4-door sedan. And whether that's a Lumina with the Georgia plates or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, do I know who helped him? No. But I'm sure of it. I'm sure of that as I am of anything. I know Mothman's real, and I know that guy had something to do with it.
Who who else? Everyone loved this woman. I mean,
Everyone
the serial
loved
killer,
this
that
woman.
first serial killer is slightly suspicious. If we want to mention some other things, the fact that his MO was to snatch people from hair salons at lunchtime is
in that area.
Is cool. That's enough to raise an eyebrow. I mean, honestly, but there isn't any evidence. And it seems like at that point, the guy, that was not the serial killer that confessed. That was the other guy. So he could have, I mean, at this point, he was going to be in prison forever. So why wouldn't he just confess to this murder too? I don't know. I mean,
I think the second serial killer, the one that recanted his confession, I think that's a red herring, and it does make the case, like, you know, more intriguing or whatever. But I think that guy's just a braggart. I think he just wants more
I don't
credit.
think anything of that guy.
I think he just wants to, you know, raise his number of kills. That first guy, there's really nothing connecting us to it. If you didn't have Rob, I'd be like, oh yeah, we got to look at him. But I feel like there's just such a more likely candidate that is sleeping with her ashes and referring to her as an object multiple times, and talking about moving her body and stuff. They seem to think that her body had been moved. I wasn't clear exactly why they thought that. Maybe they just thought it could have possibly been in that area for so long without anyone seeing it. I'm not really sure. Something someone said on Reddit that I thought was interesting was that maybe he changed the locks that day because she was in the house. Like, if she was murdered at home.
You know what? There could be something to that, especially if you're going to be suspicious of Rob and he has a very narrow window before he gets to work. Right. Yeah. I mean, maybe. Maybe you can't let Pistol in the house.
Right. He doesn't want Pistol to come in the house because there's blood he's got to clean up or something. Or there's a body he's got to move.
Yeah.
And it's just easier to be like, well, I don't like you. Go away. Then, because that's very strange to get the locks changed.
And so suspicious that why would you even, like, change the locks next week? Like, the day she, like, why would you do that? You have, even this, look, this guy seems like a dope, but he has to have enough wherewithal to say that locking her kid out of the house the day she goes missing is suspicious. So he does it because he has to, maybe.
I almost feel like, isn't that locksmith gonna know Patrice? Isn't he gonna come out and be like, really? You're changing the locks today? And then he's got to be like, yeah, for my stepson's safety. Change them now. Like,
right.
I think that's going to make everyone in town I'm sure everyone knew that happened because Pistol's out there banging on the door going, let me in. I need my backpack. Or, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you so terrible? Like, I'm sure everyone in town knew, and that only makes him look worse. So I feel like there is probably a reason he had to do that, other than he's horrible. I mean, people are very convinced of his guilt. I feel like his life is probably even more miserable. It seemed pretty miserable. When he goes in that closet to get the ashes, there's just like a lone wine glass sitting on a little shelf inside the closet. Which some people were like, it's a trophy, whatever. I was like, no, that guy just drinks alone. He has one wine glass because he doesn't have any friends.
Yeah.
That's the only one he needs.
Yeah.
Oof. Yep. Yeah, I mean, look, we're not an authority, but that's just my thought. Allegedly.
Yeah, it's I mean, look, we're, like I said, I think everyone who has watched this episode has come to a similar conclusion.
I think everybody went, oh, I solved that mystery. That one, check that off the list. Done. Solved. Like, I don't really know that we need to keep investigating. Don't need to bring in any other suspects.
Yeah.
The guy is such a creep. Such a creep.
Minimally, this guy is a dirt bag in the highest.
Oh, yeah. Like, even if he didn't do it, let's say it's one of these serial killers or something, I still want the guy to fall in a well and never get out.
Yeah.
Like, he's just a bad person, clearly. Right. Either way.
Yes.
Yeah. That I will. That I will is not alleged. He is a bad person.
Yeah, that's
he deserves to go into a cave and never find his way out. Yeah.
Totally. Well, should we rate this? Do you want to rate it?
I guess. Yeah, let's rate it.
So, I mean, if we go by our normal scale, the first one is mysteriousness. And I want to say, especially that first one,
oh man,
off the charts
so
mysterious.
Even the second one, because of the serial killer thing, it still has more mystery than you might think. So I would say thumbs up for both.
I agree. There's reenactments, but not really.
It's not the same now because this is, very Netflix style. You're getting voiceovers while there's, just shots of the woods and hands doing menial tasks and, water and stuff. I mean, they're fine. Whatever. They're not exceptional or bad. They're just standard.
They are what they are. So, yeah, I don't know.
Sideways.
Do we want to rate the fashion?
I mean, the thing is, this isn't really far enough in the past. It's not interesting. It seems fine. It's just normal
everyone
clothes.
Just looks like we look. These are normal people, so I don't know.
Thumbs down, I guess, because who cares?
We can't rate Robert Stack very sadly.
We can only rate his like profile if it briefly seen in the opening credits. Yeah. I was going to say that I feel like these stories are very gripping and they didn't need a host. They're told very well. Maybe it's not really the same show, but whatever.
I kind of don't need it to be the same show. We talked about this in a regular episode. I'm not such neither one of us are Unsolved Mysteries purists where we want the essence. I think the essence of the original show is there. It's certainly there in spirit, but it's not the same show and we kind of don't need it to be, in my opinion. Which leads us to our Robert Stack scale. So Robert Stack isn't here, but we can use our Robert Stack rating system and give these first 2 episodes a rating from 0 to 5 Robert Stacks.
I honestly am like at a 4.5 or a 5.
Me too. Definitely on the first one. Maybe I enjoyed watching them both times.
I agree.
And I mean, it led you down a rabbit hole all last night. So.
They're very gripping. And even though I had already seen them, there were little details that I didn't remember from my first watch. So it's good that I watched them again. Because there is a lot going on here. And I think they're very skillfully edited. The timing of when you're learning certain things does really create a mysterious atmosphere. Like some things, if you had learned right from the beginning, it wouldn't have seemed like such a twist. But to be like halfway through Ray's disappearance and then go, and he was interested in the Masons. You're like, what? Like, it's very skillfully placed. Yeah. I think they really know what they're doing with that. So I guess I would say 5. I highly recommend watching them, and I've watched them more than once.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm looking at my clock. That took us 2 hours, which is not bad.
My God.
I don't think. Oh
my God. Okay,
what else to talk about?
Yeah, I guess we can think about whether we want to devote single episodes to the remaining reboots, or if we'll do 2 again. But
and our listeners can let us know what you think. Do you want us to devote more time to a single episode or what? I enjoyed talking about it, so I'm looking forward to rewatching the rest of it and discussing. I cannot wait for the additional episodes to be released because Unsolved Mysteries has said that they have 6 more, so we're gonna get them at some point.
I heard a rumor that they're coming out in October, which I feel like makes sense. It's slightly spooky content. So maybe they're gonna drop in October. I would love for them to come out sooner, but
me too. But also, we have very little to look forward. Normally, we have Halloween to look forward to. We have very little.
It's so true. We need it. Oh crap. Oh, I was also gonna say that when we get to the Berkshire's UFO case, we're gonna have Rob, formerly of Our Strange Skies, on to bring his wealth of UFO knowledge to the Patreon, because there's just no way the 2 of us can do the amount of research that Rob already has in his head. Like, that guy knows everything. So 100%. That will be on an upcoming Patreon episode, but that's the 5th part of the reboot, so we're not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet. But I'm looking forward to talking about that segment, that mystery with Rob.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for your money, everyone. And if you bought something in the face mask bandana sale, thank you for that. And we are going to have some merch opportunities coming up soon. So keep your eyes out.
Stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Solve these mysteries.
Please.
Okay? Don't
like
go
you can do
out
it from your couch.
Yeah. Solve mysteries you can solve from your couch. Bitches. That's a thing. That's a phrase.
Put that on a
solve
t-shirt.
mysteries you can solve from your couch. Bitches.
Bye.
Bye.